You're listening to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. If you're a dungeon master, you probably already have a great understanding of how important it can be to react very quickly on the fly, create elements of the game as you go, and think on your feet. That is what improv in role-playing games is all about. I'm Robert Walker, author of Session Zero, the DMG to writing great campaigns in any system, and this is my show where I teach collaborative storytellers how to have more immersive campaigns using psychology. And on today's episode, we're going to be talking about improving your improv, and we're going to be doing that with some familiar voices who you may remember from Season 1, but we've also brought on the rest of their group today to talk about their show and how to improve your own improv, since their show is an improv comedy podcast. So let's go ahead and meet our guests.
Hello and welcome, Cyclophids, to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast, a podcast where all our PhDs are fake. I'm Dalton Riddle, joined by...
I'm Michael Adair.
Alissa Adair.
And I'm Andrew Gehrlein. And this is not where we belong.
No.
The wrong podcast, guys.
We're in the wrong place. I'm scared.
Oh, you guys do belong here. So first, welcome back to the show. Dalton and Andrew have been on before, but for the first time, I want to welcome Alissa and Michael. I've told the other two last time they were on the show that you guys have my absolute favorite all-time actual play podcast, and that still remains true to this day. It hasn't changed over the last few months. So
good, because the quality has dipped, and it's been noticeable for a lot of fans. They've been very vocal, so we appreciate your
quality,
loyalty.
I don't think the quality's dipped. You know, I gotta say, you guys freaked the hell out of me with the Jack in the Box on the Christmas episode. So the fact that you had to record that several times to get it right, oh man!
And it was different every time.
It was.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jack in the Box was definitely evil at first, and then it was nice. And we all got presents, but we had to record that episode 7 times.
Yeah.
That's right.
Due to technical error. So
Gotta love technology. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was funny. My wife and I were riding in the car together listening to that episode, and like I told the other two last time, this is the only actual play podcast she even listens to at all. So it's you guys are like in very exclusive company. But we're in the car, and you go in the room with just the Jack in the Box, and she turns to me, she grabs my hand and goes, "Are you going to be okay? Because I hate clowns. I freaking hate clowns." And Jack in the Boxes especially freak me the hell out.
And
not
Dalton's
alone.
voice was so eerie throughout that whole thing. You did
Yeah.
really good,
It
Dalton.
was.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I really thought something horrible was going to happen right there.
And what is a Jack in the Box but a spring-loaded clown, you know?
Yeah,
exactly
like
what it is.
a cllown designed to terrify you.
Yeah.
Worst
That's
clown.
exactly what it is.
I'm glad
So-
you had the same instincts as me. I immediately saw the room and I'm like, nope, I will not enter. Thank you.
I know you were like, I'm just going to stand at the door. I'm not going in there.
Yeah.
So what's new with the show? It's been a few months since we've talked. Can you tell me a little bit about how it's growing and the community that's found you?
Yeah, so, okay, I'll spearhead this one since no one else wants to say
lot of
anything.
voices here.
Wow,
today, so-
okay, so since the last time we were on, the show almost doubled, if not already doubled in size by both content that we have produced and just listenership that we've had. We're rounding up to almost 3,000 downloads across everything as of right now.
Nice.
We have found an incredible tabletop RPG community out there that have been nothing but supportive and kind. Robert, that includes yourself and your show. We have big plans for the future, so we're excited to see some things roll out. Just how we announced our second bonus show that will be coming, which is Dungeon Radio After Hours, that Andrew kind of had the light bulb for, which will be heavy on the role play, but more heavy on the improv. Think of it as a kind of sketch variety show. Guys, am I forgetting anything else?
No, that was so handsome.
That's everything.
that you said. I love it. Very good. Very symmetrical and strong jaw and good. I love it. Good job.
Thanks,
Very
buddy.
attractive.
Appreciate that.
So another question to the rest of you then, especially Michael and Alissa, I haven't really talked to you before, but the process of using your theater background and now you've come to this podcasting medium. I know, Alissa, you were talking on one of the recent episodes about how last year was so awesome for you and sort of getting to do all these things that you wanted to do, having a D&D podcast. But can you tell me a little bit more about how it's been and how you feel about it?
since we all went to school for theater, we know people who are in the business. Mike and I are the ones who still live out here in LA. So we get to actually see those people. When I first moved out here, I did kind of try my hand at it, a little bit of voice acting, a little bit of like background work. And it's hard, man. It's hard to like pay the bills and also follow your dreams. So it kind of got pushed to the wayside. And I remember last year going with some friends and being like, I am itching to like do something creative again. And I also love D&D. I loved playing different role-playing games with my friends over the years. And I knew I really liked the voice acting just because, especially during COVID and the pandemic, it was something you could do from home pretty easily. And again, still feel fulfilled and get scratch that creative itch. And so yeah, like when Dalton came to me with this idea, I was like, this is absolutely perfect. So I'm just so excited to not just be able to have a creative outlet again, but also to do it with my friends.
Nice.
I think it's good to have the background for the purposes of roleplay, because we're all really used to obviously inhabiting the body of other characters and stuff. I don't think that it's necessarily a requirement for folk to take out a large student loan and learn like classical Shakespearean verse to play D&D, but it adds some flavor to it for sure. We all get really into the role. And I will say, playing with different groups, it's fun playing with theater people because it's just unabashed hamminess. And roleplay is a big part of the game for me. I don't know about everybody else, but when people are sort of shy about it and they're all about like, you know, let's min-max the character, let's beef it up, I'm all about battling, that kind of gets stale for me pretty quick. So to be in a group of people who all have this ability to turn on a different voice, or even like us, we're playing in a game where we're ourselves, but we're a heightened version of ourselves for sure. It's nice to be able to do that in like this safe space where everybody just lets loose and has fun. And we're just like grown children doing this basically.
Oh yeah.
And it's awesome.
And I'm the same way. Battling is actually like one of my least favorite parts of TTRPGs, just because it's so technical and so cold and calculated. It does give us time to like improvise cool ways to attack someone, or be clever with how you defend yourself, or the quips you say before you get that final punch in. But what I like the most is just the social interaction scenes. Like you're with a shopkeeper and you want to talk the price down, and maybe we'll spend 20 minutes just riffing with that person because that's like a vocal dialogue. It's like a dialogue combat. You know, you're trying to one over each other and everything.
As well it should.
Yeah.
But
it's a lot, it's
some of that stays in.
Dalton,
And it's kind of fun.
As our game master, he's really good at responding and being in character and yes-anding, as we've of course talked about last time. So Dalton has a big hand in making that part a blast, you know, to do those social interactions with other characters.
Oh yeah. Our theater friends are evil, because in the past when we've played with our theater friends, I think Dalton and I are the ones who usually back and forth as game master. And yeah, I can talk from experience that it almost feels like they're trying to like break you, of like, let's just see how many questions you can answer. Let's throw this different thing. Social, like just in a social setting, and you're just sitting in the back of your head going, I had this whole map planned out. I had this whole thing, and you were just talking to the shopkeep for an hour to try to get me to break.
Yeah. Recently I had Dalton play 4 different orphans for no reason. I said, I don't like this orphan. Bring me a different orphan.
I remember that was pretty great. I don't like you. Let's talk to the next one.
And it was a lot of fun. Dalton's always game.
I have to be.
That is
If I
awesome.
don't, the podcast goes nowhere.
Yeah.
The story comes
sure.
to a screeching halt.
Yeah.
No, you handled
That
it
is
crazy
awesome.
well.
So last time we had Dungeon Radio Hour on, we talked about the value of comic relief in TTRPGs. If you haven't listened to that episode, Cyclothids, check it out. It was episode 30 of season 1. But today we're going to be talking about improvisation and how to improve your improv skills. And this is a skill that everyone at the game table can benefit from, and being comfortable improving can really increase the immersion in your tabletop setting. Much of your guys' show is based on the principles of improvisation, the concepts of yes and, or even no but. Can you talk a little bit about what these ideas mean, what these concepts are, and why they're so useful in telling a collaborative story?
I'll go first this time, so it's not always on Dalton.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important. I think every table can benefit from even just taking a few classes or just Googling improv games and maybe playing them with your partners, because learning how to read off of your partners and have that back and forth, that rapport, is so important, I think, to building your story together, because that's what this is. It almost, to me, reminds me of certain improv games where you are building a story together and you have to take what the other person has given you. And speaking also, just like you said, the yes and, I think a lot of people know of improv, and if they know anything, they know the yes and, right? But something I would urge people to think about, especially more with D&D, is it's not so base, black and white, yes and. You're not literally saying yes to every single thing your partner says, but more so that you're saying, I agree with the rules that you've implemented. I agree to the scenario you have now put in front of me. My character may disagree. I may go a different route, but I am establishing, yes, you are doing this thing, and I'm going to build more onto the story. And keeping that in mind, you can do a lot of exploring that way with your partner.
Absolutely. And the barrier to entry is really low. You don't have to sign up for an improv class or anything. Like, yeah, we have like improv training and experience, but it's not like a ton. I wouldn't say like we're constantly putting on improv shows or anything. This is our outlet right now. But I think the bulk of the experience that we've had is just taking what we've learned from watching other comedians and just doing it in our group. And I think it goes back to that sense of play that I really like about D&D. It's basically like sitting at the lunchroom with your friends and trying to make them laugh, right?
Yeah.
That's improv. You're using the same skills. It's the same muscle that you're exercising. You're trying to one-up each other. I like the spirit of that. Anybody can do that. Just trying to make your friends laugh. Do something random and silly and see if it works. And that's all it is throwing something against the wall and hoping that it sticks. And the more you do that, the better you get at it.
Right. And just for those, if anyone's out there going, what's yes and? What is that word? Yes and, it's sort of like, well, it's the opposite of no but, right? So if someone says they're going to do something, or if they've established, like, Mike, do you remember the other day when you got your pilot's license at a Walmart and they wouldn't give it to you?
No. But, no, I'm kidding.
See, yeah, that was I don't know, that was just random. But now, see, that now that he said no but, I lost everything. Everything I just said has been nixed by Mike. Right. Whereas if I say, Mike, when we went squirrel hunting, 2001, we were 10 years old. We were stuck in the wilderness for 4 days. You remember that?
Of course I do. It was right after my grandpa died from, what was it? That mining accident.
Oh, the mining accident. Yeah,
right.
It was more or less our fault.
Right.
Dynamite got lit.
We don't need to go over that. We don't need to rehash the past.
Well,
the squirrel
we sort of do need to rehash the past. I got a jury summons, dude, and I'm pretty sure that's us being arrested, right? What's a jury summons?
Listen, I treat those like parking tickets. I've gotten jury summons too. You just put them in a drawer. Yeah, over time, change your name, move to a different state. People forget, right?
Yeah, but that squirrel trip was crazy.
Yeah, the squirrel trip, absolutely insane.
And that was, by the way, that was not an example of good improv.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't, you guys.
But you can evolve a conversation if you just go with what the person said. But just kind of roll with it. And I think that's what improv is. It's just if someone says they have wings, and as long as it's not insane to have wings, then they have wings, and that's fine. And you just go with it.
Yeah. And then on the reverse side of that,
it's all just about listening and reacting, honestly. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and then on the reverse side of that, you do have no but, Robert, that you did bring up. And there are times when you play it into the story that it can bring everything to a screeching halt. But if you listen to the show, very rarely do I say no to anything that they throw at me. But every once in a while, I will give them a no but, because I need to shift the narrative into a specific direction so I can get them back on track. And that's another improv tool, that you're not agreeing to everything they're saying in front of you, but you are taking it, acknowledging it, and then redirecting so that the story can continue in the predetermined path, which you would have for, any type of module that you're trying to follow, or any story that you're trying to follow to get to your plot point.
Right.
Yeah, I think I was talking a little bit about the idea with some friends while we were playing billiards a couple of weeks ago. And I think that the no but scenario in the role-playing setting is a little more applicable because there's so many times where, you know, the characters are looking for something or they're investigating, and the no can really be based on the check, the thing that they roll on the dice, right? So if they're looking around and like, oh, do I find something I can use? You might have a no based on the roll, right? So I think that's an applicable time, more so in than traditional stand-up improv.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and one thing I noticed you say a lot on the show that I think works really well is when a character has a good idea, one of the players has a good idea, and they say what they're doing, you quickly follow it with, that's exactly what you do, or you say something along those lines, and then that becomes canon, that becomes part of the story, and I think that's really useful.
Yep, Dalton making us do his work.
Yeah, exactly.
It's less I have to talk, so
Right.
You're like, wow, you guessed it. That's exactly what happened.
That's exactly how it works.
Yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. Perfect. I didn't have to think of that. Do you have any examples of times either on the show or outside of the show when the improv was just like magical, or on the other side of it when it didn't go the way as planned? I know you had one intro a few episodes ago that you were trying to do a one-word story. You turned it into one sentence story, and that didn't work out exactly the way you planned.
So here's the thing: you all heard the edit.
Yep.
You didn't hear us attempt that game 7, 8 times, and it
was a
failed
lot.
miserably every
It was
single
a lot.
time.
Yep. I cut only the better ones out, which were still meh.
For sure. They're not all gems. We were definitely, that was a time when we were basically bombing each other, I feel like.
Oh,
just for the
100%.
bit. We ruined the bit for a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it was also like, we are going to improv now. It was very robotic, and we are playing a game. But as like in our podcast, we're already improving. That's already an improv game. We just don't think of it like that, so it takes that pressure off it, probably.
Well, and it's so relevant because I think our biggest problem with that was that we got in our heads. We're so used to improving in a certain way that when we then went back to a game, we were overthinking. And that's a big rule of improv, is to not overthink. You just need to be confident and just go with your first instinct. Whatever came to your head, it is right. You don't need to focus on always getting the right thing out. It's just something. And that, I think that example, that intro was a perfect example of us overthinking.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and improv is inconsistent. You know, even if you watch like Masters, like there were plenty of bloopers and deleted scenes and stuff from Whose Line. Oh, that's a great example. You know, that's a universally loved show. But there's tons of stuff that ends up on the cutting room floor because it is just what it is in the moment. And it's not always great, right? But that's kind of the magic of it. When it really worked, it's better than anything anybody could have written.
Yeah.
Because it came out of spontaneity.
It came out of truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so a really good one that I can think of where I felt like all of us were really clicking was the tavern scene where Mike ended up doing the roulette game.
That was one of my favorite scenes.
That one, and that also is such a good example of comedic improv because Mike went in such an opposite direction. I remember just laughing so hard I couldn't talk because I fully expected him to like take a sip, go, ew, this is pee, and then just stop drinking. And he's like, no, I keep going. And I'm like, why?
I have to finish it.
And turning that on its head was brilliant.
Thank you.
That was a great moment. It had me in tears. I think I told Dalton and Andrew, I was like taking trips back and forth between the mountains at that point, and I was like, you guys need to put a warning on your show because you're gonna make me crash.
The highest compliment. And if we can just kill one of our fans, that'll be enough for me.
And it's for a good cause, you know? It's for comedy.
Yes.
You
Yeah,
know,
die
not
happy,
you though,
right?
Robert. I didn't like you too much. We like all of our fans. No, I think it's about committing. I think good improv is about committing because improv doesn't need to be funny, and certainly sometimes the things we say aren't funny. I'm talking about myself, but I think as long as it comes from a place of truth and good improv, you're not only committing to your impulses and the instincts you have, committing and going for those, you're also agreeing to commit to the things your partner said previously, right? If by saying, yes, we did go squirrel hunting, that means you are collaborating with that person to commit to what they said, and they'll do the same for you. And so there's that level of trust there. And I think that's with our group and with any group that is improving together. You have to have that trust to commit to what each other does.
And I think a good example of that, and going back to Robert, what you said about when was a time that you feel like you struck magic with when improv went really well. I think specifically of, there was an episode when they go down into a portal at the bottom of the well. They find themselves in this interdimensional space, and I'm expecting them to explore this new space area that they're in. And what does Mike do? Mike kicks down a door to the first shop he sees.
I wanted to know what was in there.
Which
Somebody dared me to kick open a door.
no,
I think I made a joke like, "Hey, Mike, let's kick open some doors," like generically. But you were like, "Yes, we will literally do that."
Which immediately made me have to think, okay, now I need an NPC for this door that he just kicked down, which gave birth to, Lumcheck, which eventually turned into a commercial, and Mike and I got to have this nice little rapport with that. Or when they were in the armory running from some dwarves and they asked if there was a trench coat in the armory. Of course there's not going to be a trench coat in the armory, but we're yes-anding. So you know what? Yeah, let's give Mike and Andrew a trench coat, and let's get, what do you call it, McAndrew the 34th or whatever his name was?
Yeah.
Something
I don't know.
like
We
that.
were really tall. That's all I remember.
Yes, McAndrew
that's
something.
really
McAndrew Biggleton or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't even remember.
Tollington.
Yeah.
I think something on your show that also just kind of shows the level of improv dedication that you've put into it is you're not tying, Dalton, you're not tying exactly to the story that you want to tell. You've given control of NPCs to Andrew and to Alissa to change the story with whatever their NPCs do as well, which I think is really, really cool.
Yeah.
It adds a whole nother level of immersion and adds, more character voices that are available in NPC interactions than are normally around the table. And I think that's really just a great idea for dungeon masters out there. If you are struggling to find ideas, let your characters come up with some of them as well. It's really cool.
And it's one of those things where, I give them bullet points like, hey, this is what your character knows. This is why it's important to the story. Other than that, go have fun with it. And I think the reason why we're able to do that is we have worked with each other for so long. There is that level of trust there. And Mike kind of brought it up in something he said earlier. We have created a safe space for one another to just be stupid. And at the end of the day, that is, I really think, the key to all of this is just be stupid. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
I think, that's a different, a big aspect of our show compared to other actual play role-playing shows I listen to is that we really lean into the silliness and we lean into just whatever we all come up with and just roll with it and just see where that goes. We don't have as much structure as some others. And I like that. It keeps it very interesting, where Dalton has on more than one occasion just been like, well, I thought the story was going to go this other direction, but I guess I'm just going to trash that.
Right. You have to be willing to trash stuff. I remember when Dalton and Alissa are definitely our full-time DMs when we would play in California. I did DM maybe 3 times, and I sort of homebrewed this whole like big bad evil guy character. And my first campaign, I had planned for him to escape, right? And we would just find him again later and fight him. Somehow they trapped him, and it was my first time DMing. I didn't really have the stats worked out, and they killed him, and they killed him quickly. And so I was like, holy shit, everything I had planned is out the door. So instead I was like, you know what, next campaign, I'm going to tell them that guy they killed was actually a good guy, and he was like their Nick Fury, and oh my god, so you have to be willing to throw out all your good ideas and just go with what the characters have presented you to do.
Well, and that's why that's why improv is so important to role-playing games, is because if you wanted to write your own story from start to finish and you have this whole idea, you should go write a book. That's not what D&D is. That's not what role-playing is. It is collaborative storytelling. And so that's been probably the biggest thing for me when I was a novice game master to now, is that I don't write my endings at all anymore. I never have a plan in place because I don't want to railroad anybody. I don't want to pull that creativity from my players. I'll have a world and I'll have scenarios, and then it's like, have at it, because let's be honest, it would not go as I wanted anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. I still write from the backwards forwards because I usually think of like a cool idea at the end. But you're right, they never go that way. So even if I'll use my ending as an inspiration to start a story, the players always wreck it, or they come up with something so much better. Like I think that's probably the biggest thing when you're listening around the table and those creative juices are flowing between one person and the next, and you're as a dungeon master are accepting what they're saying. Mm-hmm. They come up with some of the best ideas that you'll ever hear in your life. And if you can latch onto those really great ones, I think that's amazing. Those are the best stories.
Yes, it's the greatest when you hear a player go, "Oh my God, what if this is the twist ending?" And you're just taking notes off to the side, like
exactly.
And you're like, you know what? Yes, that is the twist ending that I had planned all along.
Yep. Or if I have something that's pretty good and they have something that's a little bit better, is there a way to merge them together so that their idea was kind of right and my idea was kind of right, and it's even this more elaborate, more functional thing that fits, better than any of us had come up with.
Yes, absolutely. It's all about that, just listening and reacting, just the back and forth.
Absolutely. So can you give us any hints about your story, about what's coming up? What's planned for the future for Dungeon Radio Hour? You guys have done this really cool thing where the show is improv, but you're also putting in these really cool produced bits, which are great, by the way. I think it's the commercials that you guys put in are one of my favorite parts.
Oh, those are Andrew's babies, and
Andrew.
I'm always in awe every time he sends those over to me for the final edit. The final edit.
And Mike has done several too, and a lot of times I'll send a script out to Mike, like I need a punch up, or Mike has a script, or Dalton sends an idea for a commercial, and we'll work it together. So it's definitely a collaboration. But it is fun, and that has been the most fun for me because it's basically it allows us to world build in the game in a more creative way, so we can have commercials for local businesses or politicians that are running for office in the area, and maybe we'll meet those characters later. Or maybe like Lumcheck, the door got kicked in, Mike went up to the guy, the orc there, and then we had a commercial for this business he started later, a few episodes later. So it's fun way to world build, and it allows us to commit to the choices the other players made. Like Dalton invented Lumcheck, and now he's real and he has a life. And so it's been a lot of fun to put those.
And it also allows us to try something else besides improv, because it ends up being more like an audio sketch, which kind of plays into the radio hour thing that we're doing. It almost becomes a variety show, which I think is really cool, and hopefully the audience likes it as much as we liked making it. Because it's definitely fun to
they're awesome.
Put together.
I do think you're setting the bar pretty high for when you guys finally get some sponsors, because they're going to have to come up with some pretty funny spots to be featured on your show.
Or give us full creative license.
Right.
That's the way.
Casper Mattress, Blue Chew, whatever. Please give us your money, and we'll make ad spots for you.
We'll write it.
That's free labor.
I've already been thinking about how your guys' Better Help skit would go. I think that'd be pretty great.
We're going to make another sex hotline one.
Oh, yes.
yes.
The Jeff one was great. I do have to tell you guys, like the characters you make, the NPCs you've made in your story, I've stolen so many of them and thrown them in my story. So they live on not just in your universe, but now they live on in my homebrew world as well.
That is amazing.
I've had a Nora. Jeff is, I especially after the commercial, I was like, the way he's going to have with the ladies, like I've got to have a character that just comes on to one of my other characters that.
It's the worst way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk about sex.
That was good.
That was pretty good.
That was very good.
Oh yeah, I'm stealing your guys' voices too.
I like it. Please, absolutely. If you could do them, take them.
Yeah.
But no, Jeff was actually Andrew's idea even before we started this podcast.
Yeah.
He was a character that would randomly show up in like games that Andrew DM'd, and we loved him so much that we found a spot for him in the podcast, which I'm so glad we could.
Oh, before we even started, I remember Dalton coming to me and being like, I will work Jeff somehow.
Somehow Jeff the Wizard will be in this campaign.
Some way, somehow.
Yeah.
And even since leaving the area he's in, you've had callbacks. You've had the sending stone or the communication, whatever you use, so that you basically had a cell phone call with him, which was pretty awesome. And then the commercial. So I think that's another great thing about these little spots is it's reminding the listeners what else existed in the world. So it kind of calls them back to earlier episodes and reminds them of the story along the way, which is really clever. If you didn't intend that, I would pretend that you did, because it's really, really smart move.
It was all planned. 100%.
Yes, perfect. That's
like
what
from the get-go. Yeah, definitely
awesome.
Definitely planned.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Tricks of the Trade. All right, so normally in Tricks of the Trade, I start with an idea of my own, but I've got 4 people here, and that's a lot of ideas. I don't know if my listeners might get writer's cramp by the time they're done with all those ideas. So I've asked the crew from Dungeon Radio to give us each an exercise or a tip that you can use to improve your own improv skills. So whoever wants to start first, go ahead.
I was thinking about this question and trying to think of things that people can do on their own, as well as do with groups. Because, you don't always have people to play off of to hone these skills, not all the time. So 2 games that I thought of that you can play solo or just with one person that Mike and I do all the time just in our daily life is a singing game we do, where if you're like listening to a pop song or listening to something on the radio, we like to try to change the lyrics up. And it's just a quick little improv exercise of, now this is about the tacos we're making for dinner, and whatever is coming to mind, and you just start playing that, and eventually you'll notice that you can get better and better at it. Mike's great at it, but I've only just now finally been able to like rhyme in addition to thinking up lyrics. I was like, just thinking up words was hard enough. Now I'll finally rhyme them sometimes. Or another game you can play with yourself or with a partner is just when you're out about like running errands and you just see something happen, see a scenario, just see a stranger. I like to play like this sounds bad, the stranger game. I was like, ooh, stranger danger. Maybe don't call it that. Different game.
This podcast is not for kids, by the way. Don't play the stranger game.
But start doing a who, what, when, where, why with them. Start building a character from scratch. I see this person.
Oh, like making up a story about them? Yeah.
Yeah, the story game, a stranger story. Like, where are they going? Who are they? And maybe even going next level if you've played that enough, just answering those questions, building them a story. The next level would be actually play them. Don't just think of the who, what, wins, but immediately go, what voice does this person have? Give it a voice and start improving there. Sometimes I just do it in my head, when you're waiting in the checkout line. Can be just a quick little time to stretch those skills.
I love that idea. To play off that idea, that's one I do at home. I do it for my animals, though. Like, I give voices to my pets all the time, and it's like my best way to make my wife laugh is I'll just, my dog's got a real dumb voice, but hey guys, what are you, stuff like that. So, but they each have their own personalities, and it's a great way to do it because you're adding context and story and voice, and you're just kind of putting it all together. That's a wonderful idea. Thank you, Alissa.
And that's great for character work, like practicing character work and everything too.
I was going to say I do a similar thing, but I don't speak to the animals. I just speak to myself. So it's a little crazier. The number of times Cody has walked in on me just talking to myself, but like that's when I practice the voices and I practice the accents, and I'll like latch onto a voice. I'm like, okay, who talks like this? Where are they from? What do they do? Kind of like Alissa was talking about when you see a stranger. But something else that I like to do is sitting down in front of the TV. This is another improv exercise you can do on your own. Turning on a show that you don't know, and muting it, and then making the conversations with yourself.
That's beautiful.
So, reading their lips, what are they saying? What are they doing? How is this impacting, the story as a whole? Which is another fun world builder, conversation builder, social game that you can immediately put into your TTRPGs.
Yeah, because if a character does something on screen that wasn't about what you were just talking about, you have to switch what you're saying. You have to... You have to change it up. Yeah. I love that.
It's like that whole Mystery Science Theater 3000. That's a great idea. I love that.
Yeah. That's very cool. It reminds me of that Whose Line bit where they're looking at the black and white film footage on the TV.
Oh, yeah.
That game. Yeah, I love that game. Well, to kind of branch off of that, a lot of people, when you first start in an improv class, they'll tell you not to be funny. They'll say, just get used to doing improv, right?
Yeah.
But if you are going in with the intention of being funny, you can be funny from the get-go. Don't listen to anybody. Also, break rules. That's why they're there, right? There are occasions, like we talked about so far, where like you can say no, and that can still work. Because you can say no and also add information. It doesn't have to be a roadblock. that can just be a way that you can, move the story in a more natural way that fits your story better, right? On top of that, I think that it's important to note, like, when you're doing improv, it's not a magic trick. People think that, everything that improvisers do, it's right there, on the spot. It's not. We have these comedic wells that we go back to quite a bit. There are stock jokes. You're thinking things 3 minutes ahead while the other person's talking. It's something that literally anybody can do.
Well, it's a skill, just like anything else. You're honing that muscle. You learn through experience what works, what doesn't.
Yeah.
And like you said, then you'll kind of collect this little well of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Here's the stuff that works well. Here's what I can pull from.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if that's how you continue to use your brain in these little games or at the table when you're playing D&D or any TTRPG, then you will just get better at that. And anybody can do it. You don't have to be like a trained comedian or anything like that.
Nice.
I think a good improv exercise, if you're specifically wanting to go for the comedy, because a lot of comedy comes from the unexpected, right? Like the tavern example, I said it was so funny because I really didn't expect Mike to go the way he did. And so that's usually a thing of turning it on its head. A game I used to love to play, so you would have to play with people, is the scene game, where you have two people go in and they start a scene. You want to be very physical with your scene. And then at some point someone would say freeze, and now you switch. One person will switch positions with someone from the audience, someone who's waiting. You have to get in the same physical position the other person was in, but now make up a new scene for why your arms are the way they are, right? So you could have had your arms up to hit a baseball bat. Now that's a sledgehammer. Now we're in the mines and doing something else. And it's a good way to turn things on its end. It's a good way of looking at something and saying, what else could this be? How can I turn this into something new? And that can really hone your skills specifically for comedic elements.
For sure.
Yeah, I remember that one. That one's a lot of fun.
That one's so fun.
It's a lot of fun when you're actually doing it. And the thing that exercises is surprising the audience, because that's the nature of comedy, is subverting all expectations, right? So even when like I also screenwrite and stuff, when you sit down to write a scene, I like to think of 7 different ways that you could take the scene, because the more that you can subvert those expectations, like the better the audience is going to respond to it, because then they want to know what's going to happen next, right? So comedically, if you're in a serious situation, it's always good to have those surprises for your players.
I guess in terms of tips and exercises, going off sort of what Dalton and Mike had mentioned, and I think that's important, is watching the pros. I grew up watching Whose Line Is It Anyway? It was on 2 nights a week on ABC. I'd watch and I'd love it, and I think you have to immerse yourself with people you can watch and sort of you sort of absorb their methods as you're watching them. Like you might watch Colin Mockery and Ryan Stiles and Wayne Brady and all them, and you can see the gears turning in their eyes. You can see what they're looking at, and you can kind of see the sparks come on in their head. And maybe that can give you an idea of how to inspire yourself in the moment. Because improv, you kind of almost have to continuously be inspired to say something. Yeah. But my main exercise or whatever that I think is the most important is, honestly, and this applies to everything, is just warming up. I like to meditate for like a good 20 minutes. I like to stretch and turn on loud music and jump around, get the blood pumping, take breaths and get the oxygen moving. It just, think about it. I mean, your brain impulses are all electricity. They're all firing. And so if you have oxygen and if your blood's pumping and you've kind of taken time to relax yourself, then you can get out of your own way and your body is primed and ready to kind of be in fight mode. And so,
or if you need to manufacture some energy, a little cocaine, right?
Cocaine, a little Red Bull.
Nah, fentanyl's in that. Don't do it, kids.
Powdered echidna. Yeah.
That's funny. In psychology, it's all about psilocybin right now. So if anything, that's what we would recommend. Yeah.
Expand the synapses.
Walk out into the woods, grab the nearest mushroom. Don't Google it. Just pop it in your mouth.
And that's it. So
you heard it here. Robert's going to give you just the drugs you need.
That is great. So before we sign off, let me give you the opportunity to share with the Cyclothids where to connect with you on social media, where to find your podcast, anything else you guys want to share or talk about, please feel free.
Yeah, so with the podcast, it is at Dungeon Radio Hour on both Instagram and TikTok. And then on our Twitter, it's Dungeon_radio. You can interact with us on any three of those. And then on the podcast itself, all major platforms. And while you're out there listening to us, please give us a rating and a review. It goes a very, very long way with the show, and it helps us get this in front of more ears and eyes.
Yes, and if you forget any link, we do have a link tree. It's simply Linktree/Dungeon Radio Hour. So if you're ever struggling to find us, all of our links are there as well.
Awesome. And we'll put all of those links in the show notes, Cyclothids, so you can find them just by clicking there. Thank you all for coming on today. I think this is the largest group I think I've had on, except for my extravaganza. But yeah, you're obviously very comfortable with each other because you didn't speak over each other. I think that was something I always worry about in a big group, but you do it well.
Thank you.
We usually do
as
speak
you.
over each other. Alissa, I'm talking, please.
No, I'm talking to you, Drew.
Great. Now,
Excuse you.
look what.
Do you see what you've done? Robert?
Yeah, see, I threw down the gauntlet and you all tried to pick it up at the same time. That was perfect.
Everything's
Awesome.
a setup. Another comedy, everything can be a setup, right? Let's talk for 45 more minutes, Robert.
Yeah.
What I believe is important about it.
Do we want to play an improv game for the listeners? Like, what do you guys?
Oh, God, no. We want people to like
Please,
your
no.
show.
Do we want to try one sentence story again?
No. Go listen to the episodes. They're good. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, do check out their show. It is hilarious. Like I've said, it has had me in tears. I've stolen characters from their story, voices from. It is a lot of fun and it is very engaging, and you will love it just as much as I do if you check it out. So make sure you do that. Once again, thank you guys for coming, and let's head over to our knowledge check.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank
Thank you, Robert.
For today's knowledge check, I would like to introduce you to an article written by Dr. Clay Drinko on Psychology Today's website called No Joke, Improv Comedy Reduces Social Anxiety. And the article is very interesting. It has a lot of different aspects to it. But one of the most interesting parts about it is it talks about a new study that shows how improv can be used as a social emotional tool. The study required participants to take a 10-week improvisation course, and before and after that course, their levels of depression and social anxiety were measured, and the findings were that at the end of that 10-week course, the people involved felt much more comfortable in social scenarios, less depression, and overall a greater sense of well-being. So I think it's just important to realize that this skill that we are practicing at the table, this thing that we have all been doing together as a group, as I've talked about many times before on the show, is a wonderful tool in helping to alleviate some of those symptoms of depression and anxiety, to learn how to communicate better and feel more comfortable in social situations. Now, of course, if you are actually feeling very high levels of depression or anxiety, your answer isn't to just role play in your games, but I do believe that they help. I believe that they help me. But of course, obviously, if this is something that is stronger and you really need to see something for it, don't ever hesitate to go speak with somebody and find the root of your problems. But I will always advocate that as you continue to play role-playing games, you will have, benefits in your mental health and in your day-to-day life. So that is all for today, my cyclothids. As always, please give us a rating or review on iTunes or Spotify. You can also connect with us on Instagram at dungeons_dragons_psychology. And we have a link to our Linktree there that can get you to everything else. And until next time, we will see you next session.